Welcome back to Jewish World Weekly on I-24 News. I'm Calev Ben-David. Each week we will focus on stories, issues, and personalities of Jewish interest here in Israel and in the diaspora, the global Jewish community. And we start with our top 5 items in the Jewish world, presented by Nicole Seder. Nicole?
Thanks, Calev. Here are top 5 items of the Jewish world this week. U.S. President Joe Biden, Vice President Kamala Harris, and former President Donald Trump all condemned the murder of American-Israeli Hirsch Goldberg Poland and 5 other hostages held by Hamas terrorists. Thousands rally in New York City against the killings. Germany's AfD, or Alternative to Democracy Party, became the first far-right movement to win a state election since World War II. Jewish leaders criticize AfD for having anti-Semitic elements and downplaying the Holocaust. The Republican Jewish Coalition holds its annual convention in Las Vegas as GOP presidential candidate Donald Trump looks to peel off Democratic Jewish votes by attacking Kamala Harris over her support for Israel. The annual Burning Man Alternative Culture Festival in the Nevada desert includes a huge art installation called Nova Heaven that pays tribute to the victims of the Nova Music Festival murdered on October 7th. And Michael Lerner, an influential reform rabbi, political activist, and the founding editor of Tikkun, a magazine for progressive Jews, dies at 81. May his memory be a blessing. Those are all of the top 5 items in the Jewish world this week. Back to you, Calev.
Let's turn now to the U.S. presidential race, where polls show a tight race between Kamala Harris and Donald Trump. Now, one issue that is vexing Harris is support for Israel's war against Hamas in Gaza. Trump and the GOP are trying to peel away Jewish voters by claiming Harris is soft on Israel, while progressives want her to take a more critical approach, demanding an immediate ceasefire in Gaza. At the Democratic National Convention, Harris tried to refute Trump's charge without alienating her party's left wing. And this week, her campaign is launching a push for Jewish voters, spearheaded by her husband, Doug Emhoff. For more, let's go to our senior U.S. correspondent, Mike Wagenheim, in Washington, D.C.
Yeah, Calev, you know, it was interesting at the Democratic National Convention. All this attention was focused in Chicago on the issue of Israel and the Hamas war and what was supposed to be a huge turnout among these anti-Israel, some pro-Hamas protesters. Some 40,000 were estimated to go out onto the streets. Well, the numbers turned out to be much, much thinner than that. And what grabbed the attention of the convention, what was one of the unifying moments of the convention, was the appearance. And unfortunately, now we see the result of what happened in the tunnels in Gaza, but the appearance at the time of the parents of Hirsch Goldberg Poland, the hostage in Gaza who has since been killed by Hamas, and the embrace, the warm embrace they received throughout the United Center on that particular night. And it really put to rest, it seemed, this huge apparent chasm within the Democratic Party on the issue of Israel and the Hamas war. And further to that, Calev, the movement outside the arena among these protesters to get inside and have their voices heard, whether in the arena itself, and more so to get a speaking slot on stage. The Democratic Party, the leadership said, no, it's not happening. Under a whole lot of pressure, they said, no, we're not having any of this. The parents are going up there. There's no requirement that we have a Palestinian voice up on the stage. Well, we spoke to the leaders of several Jewish organizations in Chicago that week to get their opinions on this particular issue. And a lot of those organizations are for a two-state solution, for Palestinian rights. These are not right-wing groups per se. The American Jewish Committee, bipartisan, but headed by former Democratic Congressman Ted Deutsch. Hallie Soifer heads up the Jewish Democratic Council of America. She's Kamala Harris's former national security advisor. And Jeremy Ben-Ami, the president of J Street, definitely a left-leaning organization. And their responses to this particular question on whether these Palestinian voices should have been granted a slot at the DNC to be heard, and whether this protest movement needs to be included in a larger measure within the Democratic Party, their responses were pretty uniform and somewhat surprising. Let's give it a listen.
Uncommitted isn't a movement. That's, I think, the part of this that the PR machine has spun out of control. There are a couple of dozen uncommitted delegates who are here. There are, I think, over 5,000 delegates overall. The fact that they're demanding a spot to have someone stand on stage and condemn Israel and make slanderous accusations about Israel and genocide and apartheid. No, they don't have a right to speak on this stage. There has been bipartisan support for Israel in America. It's been a hallmark of the U.S.-Israel relationship. That needs to continue. And no, do I support a deal like that? There's no room to make a deal to give stage to anti-Semites.
Their voice, their views, it's not heard in the convention hall. It's certainly not shared by those on the stage, no matter what the age is in that convention hall. The reality is we're voting for the future of our country, and we know, Jewish voters know especially, that it's Vice President Harris who shares our views and our values. And for the vast majority of us, that includes her views on Israel.
Actually, they're outside the party. A lot of folks are not necessarily supportive of the Democratic Party and may end up voting third party and going, to independent streaks. And so it's not the party that's divided. There may be a handful of people in the movement left, but it is not the Democratic Party that's divided over this issue. There's a real broad mainstream consensus. It supports Israel. It does support the rights of the Palestinian people. It wants the U.S. to help resolve this conflict and bring about a ceasefire and a hostage release and better aid into Gaza, but that's a pretty strong mainstream consensus.
Mike, it's clear at the convention and the interview that Vice President Harris gave to CNN that she is trying to answer those critics who accused her of not being sufficiently supportive of Israel. But we still see in the days since then, Republicans and Donald Trump hammer her on the Israel issue. And I imagine they're going to do that when the Republican Jewish Coalition meets in Las Vegas. Clearly, they still think this is a wedge issue with Jewish voters.
No doubt whatsoever. Trump has hammered away at this time after time again, saying Harris is anti-Israel, that her husband, Doug Emhoff, essentially a bad Jew, I think was his quote. This is an issue that the Republicans feel is a winning issue. We'll be covering the Republican Jewish Coalition event in Las Vegas this week. Trump is set to speak via satellite. There'll be a number of Republican leaders there. The Democrats, yeah, they thought they kind of tidied up this issue in Chicago. From their perspective, they thought they made their message clear. Republicans are certainly not going to let it go over the coming months.
Right. And the question, of course, is whether those progressives that may be upset by the views expressed by Vice President Harris, whether they're going to stick with the Democratic Party. And we're going to have to see how that plays out in the coming months. Mike Wagenheim there in Washington, D.C. Thank you for joining us on Jewish World Weekly. And staying in the U.S., it is back to school week. And for Jewish students and Israel supporters, it's back to pro-Palestinian, anti-Israel, and in some cases, certainly anti-Semitic protests and incidents on many campuses. More in this report from Emmanuel Honorat.
As the new school year opens in North America, the big question is, have universities there learned the lessons of how to deal with the pro-Palestinian, anti-Israel demonstrations that disrupted campus life, terrorized Jewish students, and descended into anti-Semitic rhetoric? At New York's Ivy League Columbia University, which saw some of the most extreme protests, a new report by a task force on anti-Semitism set up by the school's administration details just how bad things got.
After October 7th, many Jewish and Israeli students began to report multiple instances of harassment, verbal abuse, and ostracism, and in some cases, physical violence. The experiences of these students demonstrated that there is an urgent need to reshape everyday social norms across the campuses of Columbia University.
Change is clearly needed at Columbia, which last month saw the sudden departure of President Minouche Shafik after she was criticized for her handling of the protests. But some of the Jewish students there are still concerned going into the new academic year.
Concerns about this year, I'm definitely concerned. I mean, if you look at the SJP Instagram or the CU Apartheid Divest Instagram, there are constant threats of physical violence. In fact, the other day, See Apartheid Divest posted saying that they have to meet the resistance. They have to meet the resistance in Palestine here. They have to, be ready to sacrifice themselves, be ready to martyr themselves. And to me, that's a direct threat. That's implying that they will be ready to confront Jewish students with physical violence, to confront the police. And these are all very concerning things.
At New York University, the administration issued new guidelines on discrimination and harassment aimed at protesters targeting of, quote, Zionist students and faculty. Other schools are moving to limit on-campus demonstrations.
The University of California released a statement making it clear no masking on campuses, no encampments on campuses, and they're taking much more drastic steps. We've seen other universities issue similar statements and new policies this summer. So if the universities simply enforce their own rules and demonstrate a zero-tolerance policy on those who promote intolerance, things should be fine. But if the universities think that the way they can protect their Jewish students is by standing back and doing nothing, it's going to be a very ugly, violent fall for sure.
But not every school has learned the lessons of the past year when it comes to curtailing anti-Semitism and anti-Israel incitement. The University of Maryland has approved a rally held on campus by Students for Justice in Palestine, a group banned at several other schools for harassing Jewish and pro-Israel students. The date of the rally, October 7th.
And joining us now from New York is Adela Coab Moadeb, legal fellow at the National Jewish Advocacy Center, NJAC, who 5 years ago sued NYU for allowing Students for Justice in Palestine to cause Jewish and pro-Israel students to feel unwelcome and unsafe. And Adela, thanks for joining us. You were certainly well ahead of the curve on this issue. Let me just begin by asking you about your alma mater and mine, NYU, and how you feel about their new code of conduct for students advocating against discrimination, specifically against Zionists.
I mean, first off, thank you for having me. Second, this is a long time coming. And, considering I sued NYU 5 years ago, and then they went through another suit after October 7th, it's amazing to see them finally take a step that spells out that Zionism is a part of Jewish identity, and anti-Zionism has been used to attack Jewish students, not only at NYU, but on other campuses. So looking at the policy itself, I honestly could not be more satisfied, but let's see if they implement it. That's always the biggest question. But the first step has been taken, and let's hope other universities follow suit.
Let's hope so. And let's talk about other steps that you would like to see universities take, and also not just university administrators, maybe even, for example, if there should be a governmental steps taken in order to protect Jewish students on campus.
Well, when it comes to universities, I have been saying for years that the issue isn't with the students, the issue is the faculty. Because when you come onto your college campus, 18 years old, bright-eyed, bushy-tailed, whoever your professor is really going to make an impact on how you see the world and how you mobilize. At least at NYU, professors themselves are the ones that were stoking the flames of the Students for Justice in Palestine. Colleges have a 4-year turnaround when it comes to students. What remains is the faculty. So what I would like to see from universities themselves is accountability for faculty that have been promoting Jew hatred for years. Now, when it comes to a national level, a federal policy, I think the executive order on anti-Semitism of 2019 was a really good and welcome first step. That's the one that essentially enshrined anti-Zionism as anti-Semitism, but I'd like to see that on a national level. I also think when it comes to Title VI compliance, nationally, there hasn't been much movement. Title IX, after the Me Too movement, turned into a staple of universities. Every university got a Title IX coordinator. Every student was trained on sexual harassment and consent. Why don't we have that for Title VI? And as part of the settlement with NYU, now there has been a Title VI position for a coordinator created at NYU, and I expect to see that across universities.
And what do you think students should be doing, or student organizations or Jewish organizations? And I know, for example, the NJAC is continuing with legal action in certain cases, for example, against that Students for Justice in Palestine.
100%. 100%. I think that if you're a Jewish student on campus or a Jewish organization, the first thing you need to do is get out of the victim mentality. Also, for years, Jewish students have been told that if you draw attention to the issue, you'll make it bigger. If you ignore it, it'll go away. Keep your head down, write your essays, graduate in 4 years. That's not the case. When they go low, we go high, but it's about time that Jewish students start claiming the space that they deserve. Don't check your identity at the door if you're a Jewish student. Come in as a full Jewish Zionist into your classrooms. Now, for Jewish student groups, they have to prepare their students, which means knowing their rights. I had no idea when I was 18 showing up on my campus that I had rights, let alone how to use them. I sued NYU right before I graduated, and now after October 7th, students understand that they can take legal action. There are so many legal Jewish professionals and organizations, and JAC being one of them, that are here to support students. So know your rights and don't be afraid to use them.
All right, and hopefully students will be speaking out against decisions which we mentioned, such as University of Maryland allowing the Students for Justice in Palestine to hold a rally on October 7th. Adela Kohab Moadib at the National Jewish Advocacy Center, NJAC. Thank you for joining us on I-24 News.
Of course.
Now, what makes someone convert to Judaism? Not only convert, but also make aliyah, immigrate to Israel. Someone who grew up in a religious family in a deeply Catholic society, from a country whose current government has become harshly critical of the Jewish state. Let's meet a remarkable young woman from the South American nation of Colombia, Hadassah Perez, and join her on her road to becoming a Jew in this report from the host of our Spanish language program on I-24 News, Nicole Michel, and producer Fabio Shapiro.
From Colombia to Israel, Hadassah, a Jewish soul. Hadassah, you are in Israel. Are you happy?
This is the best period of my life. Yes, I'm very happy, and above all, grateful to God.
What's it like for a girl born in Cali, Colombia, to feel her soul is moving and leading her to a different path? What happened?
At 15, before going to university, I began to question the religion I was raised in, Christianity. My mom always took us to the place she thought was right to bring us close to God. She instilled good morals and values in us. She felt the church was the way to get closer to God, a more modest, quieter Christianity, studying the Bible and trying to get close to God without fanaticism. And at 15, my Aunt Naomi began to study the Torah in an emerging community in Colombia. The teacher there had been a pastor and later converted and began to teach the Torah. She liked it and asked me what I was doing, and I said I was not studying anything, that I knew God existed and wanted to connect with him. But I was unable to find him in the church and felt clueless. My aunt told me to read the Council of Nicaea.
And the decision to convert from Christianity to Judaism.
It's about the soul. I cannot explain it. It's something you feel. It's a conviction. I know it's right and what I have to do, and that if I don't, I won't fulfill my mission in this world, and I won't have peace or be happy, and I won't develop fully as a human being, because I lack the main thing, God. I joined the community and began to study the Bible, Jewish law. While I was studying law at university, I was attending Bible lessons.
Which university?
At Pontificia Universidad Javeriana in Cali, I also took Bible lessons. So I was between university and the synagogue. When I finish my degree, God willing, I will convert. I felt like a new person. I can't explain how I felt when I was under the water. I was like, thank you, God. You made me Jewish. You allowed me the virtue of being part of this people.
Once you decide to convert, what was the process like?
I studied at the Cali community for years. And when I graduated, I went to Miami. I wanted to convert there, but it turned out I ended at a rabbinic tribunal in Cali. There were rabbis from Israel there, and there were people from all over the world, people from Mexico, Venezuela. At the rabbinic tribunal, they asked the Jewish law questions related to Jewish life.
What was the most difficult question from the tribunal?
Why does Sukkot take place when it does? Because it had to come right after Pesach. And the answer was rain. It is more comfortable to be in a cabin if it's not raining and everything is nice than to stay in a cabin when the weather is not that good.
After the conversion, when did you decide to move to Israel, to go from Colombia to Israel?
I always knew I wanted to live in Israel. My friends from university must remember I said that I'd move to Israel. That was my dream. Why? Because all the skills and potential God gave me, I wanted to give it to Israel, to the people who are my people, my nation.
What did your friends tell you?
That I was crazy. And I said yes. And I like that. I like to think differently. Now I'm here in Israel. It was truly a miracle that God has me here studying the Bible, allowing me to be an Israeli citizen. I think that's a miracle.
President Gustavo Petro of Colombia breaks ties with Israel. How do you feel as a Colombian citizen doing this process here in Israel?
It's precisely due to lack of information. We have a president who is not familiar with the Jewish culture and values and what Israel gave to the world, and specifically to Colombia, of the great donations Israel made to improve the quality of life of many people, from a culture of violence in which the president of our country also lived, because he knows no other reality but terrorism, of which he was a part too. So acknowledging more lofty values and ideals is not easy, even for the ruler of a nation. Colombia, despite being a secular country with a Catholic majority, loves Israel. The president does not define or speak on behalf of Colombians. The majority of the Colombian people love Israel. If you ask a Christian in Colombia, they will say they love Israel, the Jewish people, and its culture.
Alisa Goldberg lived in Mexico as a child, although she was born in Israel to Argentinian parents. She is the director of the Latin program at Midrasha Lindenbaum.
We have girls from many countries. They all come to Israel, and though they come from different places, they all come with the same goal: to grow, develop, and know this land. That's what makes it special, and automatically they come together like a magnet.
There are Jewish girls and girls who converted.
Yes, most of them are Jewish, but we have girls who converted or sometimes are in the process. People sometimes discover they're not Jewish and they come here too.
Why is it important to study the Bible?
Okay, let me tell you. Look, I think the Bible is our physical and spiritual guide. I don't see life without the Bible. The Bible gives us the guidelines to live the best life possible, both in terms of day-to-day things like helping others, how to live as a family, how to be a good wife, how to be a good partner, a good parent. All that part is related to ethics, so to speak. And I think also the commandments, the dispositions in the Bible.
How can we explain to someone from Latin America who the Jews are?
I feel that to some extent we are a light to the world. It's part of what we are seeing right now. We can see the whole world focusing on one tiny country. I feel that shows us how the whole world has their eyes set on Israel and Judaism. And also the fact that so many people convert to Judaism is because Judaism draws their attention. There's something special. Wherever you have 3 Jews, you have 5 different ideas. So I have no doubt the secret to peace is understanding everyone plays an instrument, but we're all part of the same orchestra.
Hadassah is part of that orchestra, the strength of the soul, values for the world, without fears, leaving our comfort zone. Life gives you surprises. Surprises gives you life.
A remarkable young woman. Now, the relationship between Jewish people and pickled food goes back to the ghettos in Eastern Europe, a tradition carried into New York City in the 20th century and passed down through subsequent generations. One New York bookseller has decided to incorporate the flavors of her ancestors with her love of books to create an innovative secondhand bookstore. One where if you trade 5 books, you will receive a jar of pickles. Joe Brown has that story.
When I was opening the shop, so many people told me, like, you're crazy, and this is oh my God, what a crazy idea. It's so expensive, this is a bad idea, what are you thinking? And I'm like, no, I know this is a good idea.
During the COVID-19 pandemic, Lee Altshuler was in a bit of a pickle. She had lost her job in marketing and had broken up with her boyfriend and wanted to try something new. A self-professed book nerd, she saw the empty storefronts on New York's Lower East Side and thought of opening a cozy second-hand bookstore. And then she remembered hearing stories about Jewish immigrants lining these streets, selling pickles in the 1920s, and she had a light bulb moment.
And I have so many people who come in here and they say, books and pickles are my two favorite things in the whole world. How did you know? So it turned out to be a happy accident, and the Venn diagram of people in the center of books and pickles are very enthusiastic.
In the early 20th century, Jewish immigrants from Eastern Europe came to New York in pursuit of the American dream. One of the most commonly consumed foods in the Jewish ghettos were pickles, as they were easy to make and to preserve over the cold winters. Thus, Jewish pickle vendors sold what is now considered a staple in the Ashkenazi Jewish diet across the Lower East Side. Fast forward 100 years, and Altshuler wanted to incorporate New York's Jewish history into her secondhand bookstore and created Sweet Pickle Books, a shop where you can exchange used books for pickles or, if you so please, buy your own dill pickles, pickled by Altshuler herself.
You know, when I opened this shop, I had 360 jars of pickles, and I thought, okay, this will for sure last me forever, and I've gone through more than 20,000 jars. So it's going really well.
Customers come from all across the US, and sometimes even across the world, to visit the bookstore on Orchard Street. Many customers love the books, which would otherwise end up in a landfill. And with the added incentive of pickles, it's a great deal all round.
Books and pickles. Who knew? I'll have to pay a visit there when I'm back in New York. Anyway, that's our program for this week. Thanks for joining us again on Jewish World Weekly on I-24 News. I'm Calev Ben-David, and shalom from Israel.